Caroline Whitmore had everything the world respected. The glass corner office, the billion-dollar company, the sharp suit, the perfect smile, and 400 employees waiting for her next word as if it could decide their future. Jack Whitaker had a gray janitor's uniform, a mop bucket, a lunch bag with a faded rocket ship on it, and a 7-year-old daughter who still asked him to leave the hallway light on at night. To everyone in that packed auditorium, he was invisible. Just another maintenance worker moving quietly along the back wall while powerful people talked about numbers growth and success. But in less than 30 seconds, Caroline would make the worst mistake of her career. A cup of coffee would hit the floor, Jack would kneel to clean it, and Caroline, irritated by the interruption, would humiliate him through a live microphone in front of the entire company. No one defended him. No one asked who he was. No one noticed the way the older security consultant suddenly went still, or the way 2 former soldiers in the room looked at Jack as if they had just seen a ghost wearing a janitor's shirt. Caroline thought she had embarrassed a poor single father who needed the paycheck too badly to speak back. She had no idea the man on his knees had once carried a military code name so classified that even his official record looked empty. She had no idea he had walked into places where governments denied he existed, made choices that saved lives, and then buried every medal, every file, every shadow of that life for one reason, his daughter Lily. And when fire later trapped people inside Caroline's own tower, the man she treated like nothing would become the only reason any of them made it out alive. By 8:47 that morning, the 42nd floor of Northbridge Tower already felt too small for the people inside it. The quarterly meeting had not even begun yet. More than 400 employees were packed into the main auditorium, shoulder to shoulder in rows of folding chairs, their printed agendas resting on their knees, their phones dimmed but not put away, their faces tilted toward the massive screen glowing behind the stage. The air conditioning had failed to keep up with the crowd, and the room carried that uncomfortable corporate heat made of projector light, expensive perfume, burnt coffee, nervous ambition, and too many people pretending they were not sweating. At the back of the room, moving quietly along the wall as if he had been drawn in pencil instead of ink, Jack Whitaker pushed a gray utility cart between the credenzas and collected empty paper cups, crumpled napkins, and pastry wrappers left behind by people who would never remember touching them. His uniform was clean but worn at the seams, a gray shirt with the Northbridge facilities patch stitched over the chest sleeves rolled to the elbows, dark work pants, scuffed, black shoes polished only enough to look respectable from a distance. He had been in the building since before sunrise. By the time most of the company's senior managers were still deciding whether to order oat milk or black coffee, Jack had already changed a broken fluorescent tube on the 3rd floor, unclogged a drain on the 7th, replaced a soap dispenser bracket on 12, mopped the lobby twice after rainwater and mud had been tracked across the marble, and carried extra chairs up in the service elevator because someone in operations had forgotten to request them until the night before. None of this made him angry. It was work. And work was something Jack understood. Work had rules. Work had outcomes. You saw what needed doing, you did it, and if you did it well, nobody noticed. For 8 months, that had been the arrangement, and he preferred it that way. Being unnoticed was not natural to some men, but it had become natural to Jack after years of learning how to enter a room, read every exit study, every face, hear every change in tone, and leave no trace of himself behind. He had not always been a janitor. His hands had not always held mop handles and replacement filters. His boots had not always walked polished corporate floors. But that life belonged to a place he no longer named, and the only title that mattered now was the one Lily used when she called him Dad. At exactly 8:58, Caroline Whitmore entered the room, and the room subtly rearranged itself around her presence. She was 30 years old, the youngest CEO in Northbridge Capital Management's history, and she carried that fact as if it were both a crown and a weapon. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer, a cream silk blouse, and heels that struck the floor with clean, measured authority. Her blonde hair was pinned back in a style that looked effortless only because someone had spent time making it perfect. Beside her moved Tyler Brooks, her assistant, thin, alert, and permanently apologetic, balancing a tablet, a leather folder, and the tension of someone paid to anticipate needs before they became spoken words. Two executives trailed behind her, laughing softly at something she had said, though Jack could tell from across the room that whatever it was had not been funny enough to deserve laughter. Caroline did not look toward the back wall. People like her rarely did unless something there had gone wrong. She stepped onto the stage, placed her folder on the podium, adjusted the microphone, and took one calm breath. At 9 o'clock exactly, she began to speak. The first 40 minutes went smoothly enough to feel rehearsed by fate. Caroline was good. Even Jack, who watched the presentation with only half his attention while replacing empty coffee carafes along the side table, could recognize that. She knew where to pause, when to sharpen her voice, when to let silence make a number feel heavier. She spoke about growth risk, restructuring, client retention, market confidence, and operational discipline with the polished certainty of someone who believed the world rewarded control. Employees leaned forward. Managers nodded. The board members seated near the front kept their expressions neutral but attentive. Caroline had the room, and she knew she had it. Then Peter Caldwell stood up in the fourth row. Peter was a senior analytics manager in his mid-40s, a broad man with thinning brown hair and the restless energy of someone always one email behind. He had been holding a large coffee cup in his lap because there was no room on the narrow seat-back tray. When a colleague tried to slide past him toward an empty aisle seat, Peter shifted too quickly. The cup tipped. He grabbed for it, overcorrected, and the plastic lid popped loose with a small, fatal snap. Coffee arced through the air and splashed across the carpet, the leg of a folding chair, and the polished shoe of a woman sitting 2 seats away. The sound was not loud, but in a room that had been trained into silence by Caroline's voice, it landed like a dropped plate. Caroline stopped mid-sentence. The screen behind her still showed a blue chart labeled Projected Q1 Performance, but nobody was looking at the chart anymore. Jack had already seen the accident before the first gasp traveled through the row. He pulled a clean rag from his cart, took a small bottle of cleaner from the side pocket, and moved along the wall with practiced speed, low and unobtrusive. By the time Peter had begun stammering an apology, Jack was already kneeling beside the spill, blotting the coffee before it spread deeper into the carpet. "Could we please be more careful?" Caroline said into the microphone. Her voice was not loud. That made it worse. Loud anger could be dismissed as a loss of control. This was deliberate, calm, surgical. This is a corporate presentation, not a break room. A few people lowered their eyes. Someone in the back gave a nervous cough. Peter opened his mouth, then closed it, his face reddening as he looked from Caroline to the woman's shoe to Jack on the floor. "It was my fault," he managed. "I'm sorry, It's fine," Caroline said in a tone that made clear it was not fine at all. Her gaze lowered briefly to Jack, who was still cleaning, still silent, one knee pressed into the carpet, one hand working the rag in slow circles. "Thank you," she added, the words landing cold and thin, less like gratitude than dismissal. Jack did not look up. He had learned long ago that some rooms demanded silence not because silence was weakness, but because speaking would give the room more of him than it deserved. He finished blotting the stain, wiped the chair leg, collected the broken lid, and stood. For one moment his eyes moved across the room, not searching, counting. The exits, the faces, the people who looked ashamed, the people who looked relieved it had not been them, the people who had already decided the moment was over because it had happened to someone beneath them. Near the side aisle, Robert Hayes from Executive Security stood very still, watching Jack with an expression that did not belong in a corporate meeting. Recognition, caution, respect. Jack saw it and looked away. That was the first crack in the life he had built. He pushed the cart back toward the service door as Caroline resumed her presentation, her voice steady again, her rhythm restored, the company's attention returning to charts and projections as if a man had not just been made small in front of them. Jack spent the rest of the morning fixing a loose handrail on 26 and replacing trash liners in conference rooms where people discussed money in numbers large enough to feel fictional. At noon, he ate lunch in the facility's break room on the 14th floor, sitting across from Henry Cole, a 61-year-old maintenance worker with a gray mustache, bad knees, and a talent for knowing everything that happened in the building before anyone officially said it had happened. "Heard about 42, Henry said, peeling the lid off a container of soup. Jack unwrapped a ham and cheese sandwich from a small insulated lunch bag printed with a faded cartoon rocket ship, the same bag Lily had picked out from a dollar store when she was 4. "People hear fast," Jack said. "People talk fast when somebody powerful acts ugly," Henry replied. "She had no right doing that to you." Jack took a bite of his sandwich and chewed slowly. "Coffee needed cleaning. That's not what I'm talking about." "I know." Henry leaned back, studying him. "You should file something." Jack almost smiled, but it did not reach his face. "With HR." "Yes, with HR. And then what?" Henry frowned. Jack folded the edge of the sandwich wrapper with careful fingers. "I need Fridays flexible. I need to pick Lily up from school. I need health insurance. I need this job to stay boring." Henry's expression softened in spite of himself. "Boring doesn't mean letting people step on you." "No," Jack said quietly. "It means knowing which battles cost more than they're worth." That afternoon, when Jack reached Lily's school 2 minutes late, she stood on the front steps with her arms crossed, purple hoodie zipped to her chin, backpack hanging heavily from both shoulders. "You're late," she announced. 2 minutes, he said. "Ms. Harper says parents are supposed to be here at 3:30. Ms. Harper is right. Then why weren't you Jack crouched to tie her loose shoelace?" Train was slow. Lily narrowed her eyes. 7 years old and already too good at detecting incomplete answers. She had her mother's blue eyes, his dark blonde hair, and the kind of seriousness that made adults forget she was still small enough to need a nightlight. "Are you okay?" she asked. Jack's hand paused on the knot. "I'm okay." "You look tired." "I got up early." "You always get up early." He finished tying the lace and stood. "Then I always look tired." She did not laugh. She slipped her small hand into his, and together they walked toward the train station while the city moved around them, loud and ordinary, and unaware that Jack Whitaker's carefully hidden life had begun to shift beneath his feet. He listened as Lily told him about a talent show coming in 6 weeks, about maybe singing, about being afraid people would stare. He told her fear got smaller when you remembered why you were doing something, and she leaned against his arm as if that answer was heavy enough to carry home. But later, while she did math homework at the kitchen table and he stirred pasta sauce on the stove, Jack found himself thinking about Caroline's voice through the microphone, Robert Hayes's frozen stare, and the old instinct stirring in his chest like a locked door being tested from the other side. He had built this quiet life for Lily. He had buried every file, every medal, every name that used to follow him through dark places. But for the first time in years, Jack understood something with absolute clarity. Someone in that building had recognized him, and once the past found even the smallest opening, it rarely stayed buried for long. The next morning, Jack Whitaker woke before the alarm, not because he had slept enough, but because his body had never fully remembered how to rest like an ordinary man. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the old wall clock above the kitchen doorway. Chicago lay beyond the window in the gray-blue hour before sunrise, its streets wet from overnight rain, its buildings rising like dark blocks against a pale sky. Jack stood barefoot in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee he had barely tasted, staring at the framed photograph beside the toaster. Grace Whitaker was laughing in that picture, her blonde hair loose around her face, her head tipped back near the edge of a lake on a summer afternoon that now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Jack looked at her the way he did every morning, just long enough to remember and not long enough to break. "Today is going to be fine," he said quietly, though he did not believe it. He had said the same words every morning since the funeral at first because he needed to hear them later, because Lily needed a father who could keep standing, and now because some routines became bridges over things too deep to cross any other way. By 6:30, Lily was awake, sitting at the kitchen table with one sock on and one sock missing, arguing that cereal tasted better when eaten from a mug instead of a bowl. Jack found the missing sock under the couch, packed her lunch, signed a permission slip she had forgotten to mention until that morning, and listened while she explained that the school talent show auditions were in 5 weeks, and that she might sing, but only if no one looked directly at her. People looking is kind of the point of a talent show, Jack said, sliding the lunchbox into her backpack. That's what makes it unfair, Lily replied, and Jack smiled because she sounded so much like Grace when she decided the universe needed correction. He dropped Lily at school on time, watched her disappear through the double doors in her purple hoodie, and felt the familiar tightening in his chest as he turned back toward the train. Every morning he left her some old part of him checked exits, measured distance, calculated threat, then had to be reminded that this was an elementary school, not a hostile border crossing, not a sealed compound, not one of the forgotten places where his former name had meant something. By the time he reached Northbridge Tower, the lobby was already filling with employees moving in clean coats and polished shoes, carrying coffees, laptops, and expressions of practiced importance. Jack entered through the service corridor, changed into his gray uniform, clocked in, and told himself the same lie he had told Grace's photograph today would be fine. It lasted 19 minutes. He was replacing a cracked tile outside a conference room on the 16th floor when Robert Hayes appeared at the end of the hall with another man Jack did not know. The stranger was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, hair graying at the temples, visitor badge clipped to his jacket, eyes too still to be harmless. They were speaking in low voices, but Jack heard enough before they saw him. "I told you it was him," the stranger said. "I didn't believe it until I checked the service dates," Robert answered. "There are no service dates that matter, that's the point." Then both men turned the corner fully and stopped. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was professional, adjusted, controlled. Jack kept one knee on the floor tile adhesive on his glove, his body calm while his mind moved quickly through possibilities. Who was the stranger who had called him? How much did Robert know? Had Caroline asked questions? Had someone outside the company pulled a thread? The stranger looked at Jack not like a man looking at a janitor, but like someone comparing a memory to a face that had aged, softened, and hidden itself under ordinary clothes. Robert cleared his throat. "Morning, Whitaker." Jack stood slowly. "Morning." The stranger did not speak, but his eyes flicked to Jack's hands, his stance, the angle of his shoulders, the small details that trained men noticed when they were trying not to notice. Jack picked up the broken tile and placed it in the waste bin. "Conference room's clear in 10 minutes, he said. "Good," Robert replied, but his voice had changed. Jack pushed his cart down the hall without looking back. Every step measured, every instinct inside him awake now. By lunch, the building felt different. People who had ignored him for 8 months suddenly looked twice. Mark Reynolds from security held the service elevator for him and said, "Sir," before catching himself. Emily Carter from HR stopped beside his cart on the 2nd floor and asked if he needed anything, though Emily had never asked him anything before. Even Caroline Whitmore, crossing the lobby with Tyler Brooks at her side, paused for half a second when she saw him near the security desk. She did not speak, but her eyes stayed on him longer than they should have. Jack understood what was happening. Status moved through buildings like electricity through old wiring. It jumped from one person to another, invisible until something sparked. Robert and Mark were treating him with a careful respect they thought was subtle. It was not. Other people were noticing, and Caroline, who noticed everything that might affect her company, had begun to wonder why powerful men in her security division looked at a janitor as if he outranked them. That afternoon, Richard Bennett, Jack's supervisor, called him into the maintenance office with a tone that tried to sound casual and failed. Richard was a decent enough man, tired in the way middle managers became tired with too much paperwork and not enough authority. He closed the door after Jack entered. Something I need to ask you, Richard said. Jack remained standing. Okay. Richard tapped a pen against a clipboard. I got a call from HR, nothing formal, just a question. They asked if there had ever been any incidents with you. Incidents, behavior issues, conflicts, anything unusual. Jack's face did not change. And what did you say? I said no, because there haven't been. Richard shifted uncomfortably. But then executive security asked about your access badge logs, not in a disciplinary way, more like they were checking where you usually are in the building. Jack felt the old calculation sharpen. Why are you telling me? Richard looked at him for the first time like a man rather than an employee file. Because you do your job and I don't like people digging around my department without telling me why. For a moment, Jack almost respected him more than he had intended to. I appreciate that. Is there something I should know? Richard asked. There it was, the question Jack had spent years avoiding in one form or another. He could lie easily. He had been trained by people who considered lies tools, doors, weapons, shelters, but he was tired of the old life reaching into this one through cracks he had not made. No, Jack said. Nothing that changes the work. Richard studied him, then nodded, choosing not to push. But the damage was done. By the time Jack clocked out, he had made the decision he had been resisting all day. He would update Lily's emergency contact list, move a little extra cash from the envelope behind the kitchen drawer, and call the one number he had never saved in his phone. Not because he planned to run, he told himself, only because a father prepared before preparation became panic. That evening, Lily was waiting on the school steps, humming to herself with her backpack between her feet. She looked up as he approached. You're on time, she said, trying something new. She took his hand, but after a few steps, she looked at him sideways. You're doing the face. What face? The thinking face, the one where your mouth forgets it's a mouth. Despite himself, Jack laughed softly. That bad, very bad. They stopped at the crosswalk, the city roaring past in wet streaks of headlights. Lily squeezed his hand. Is it about the lady at work? Jack looked down. Why would you ask that? Because grown-ups think kids don't hear things, but we do. Henry said she embarrassed you. He said she acted like you were nobody. Jack made a mental note to have a serious conversation with Henry about speaking within earshot of children. Caroline Whitmore made a mistake, he said carefully. People make mistakes. Did she say sorry? Not yet. Lily's face tightened. Then it's not finished. The words landed harder than Jack expected. It's not finished. That was exactly what his instincts had been telling him all day, though not about Caroline alone. At home, Lily did homework at the kitchen table while Jack made chicken soup because the rain had turned cold and because soup made the apartment feel less fragile. She practiced multiplication, got frustrated, recovered, then asked if he would listen to her try a song after dinner. He said yes, and when she sang, her voice was small at first, then steadier, then suddenly brave for 3 lines before fear pulled it back. Jack clapped quietly. Lily frowned. Don't clap like I'm a baby. I clapped like I was impressed. Were you? Yes. She studied him, searching for the lie, then accepted the answer. Later, after her bath, after the book, after she had been tucked under her blanket with the hallway light left on exactly halfway, she asked Dad, when people are wrong about you, do you have to prove them wrong? Jack sat on the edge of her bed. The question opened something in him. He thought of Caroline's voice through the microphone, of Robert's stare, of the stranger in the hallway, of sealed files, burned cities, names spoken only in secure rooms, medals locked away in a box Lily had never seen. He had spent years believing peace meant disappearing, but disappearing had not protected him from being judged. It had not stopped Caroline from making him small. It had not stopped the past from finding him. Maybe silence was not always strength. Maybe sometimes silence left the wrong lesson standing in the room. No, he said slowly. You don't have to prove everything, but sometimes you do have to stand where you are and tell the truth. Lily blinked sleepily. Are you going to do that? Jack looked toward the hallway light, then back at his daughter. I think I have to. She nodded as if this had always been obvious. Good. After she fell asleep, Jack sat at the kitchen table with his phone in front of him. For 10 minutes, he did nothing. Then he typed a message to a number memorized from another life. Someone in Chicago is asking, "Need to know if this reaches Lily." The answer came 43 minutes later. "Not from us. Keep distance. Protect the girl." Jack read the words twice, then deleted the message. He did not sleep much. In the morning, instead of avoiding Caroline, instead of waiting for the building's whispers to become something worse, he requested a meeting through Tyler Brooks. When Tyler replied in surprise that Ms. Whitmore had 10 minutes available at 9:20, Jack accepted. At 9:19, he stood outside the CEO's office in his gray uniform, his badge clipped to his chest, his hands clean, his posture calm. Caroline opened the door herself. For the first time since he had met her, she did not look certain. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, "you wanted to speak with me." Jack stepped inside, glanced once at the glass walls, the long desk, the city behind her, then met her eyes. "Yes," he said. "You have people asking questions about me. I'm here to tell you which ones you're allowed to ask and which ones you're not." Caroline's expression changed, not with anger, but with recognition that the man standing in front of her was not the man she had thought she humiliated. Jack did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply stood there, no longer invisible, and for the first time since he had put on the gray uniform, he chose not to hide. Caroline Whitmore did not invite Jack Whitaker to sit down right away, and Jack did not ask for permission to stand. For a moment, the only sound inside the CEO's glass-walled office was the distant hush of the city below and the soft click of Tyler Brooks closing the door behind him from the outside. Caroline's office looked exactly the way people expected power to look. Clean lines, polished wood, framed magazine covers, a long desk without clutter, and a skyline view so wide it made everyone beneath it seem smaller. Jack stood in the center of that room in his gray facilities uniform badge clipped to his chest, work boots leaving no mark on the expensive rug, and somehow the room felt less like Caroline's the longer he remained silent. Caroline folded her hands in front of her, studying him with the cautious attention of someone who had opened a door expecting one thing and found something else waiting. "I'm listening," she said. Jack nodded once. "Good. Then listen carefully. Whatever you found in my personnel file is all you need to know for company purposes. I passed your background check. I do my job. I have no disciplinary issues. I am not a threat to your building, your employees, or your reputation." Caroline's jaw tightened slightly at the last word because reputation was one of the languages she spoke fluently. "That sounds like a warning," she said. "It's a boundary," Jack replied. "There's a difference." She held his gaze. "People in my security division are behaving as if you are not simply a janitor. People behave strangely when they don't understand what they're looking at." "And what am I looking at?" Jack did not answer immediately. He looked past her for half a second, not at the skyline, but at the reflection in the window behind her where he could see the office door, Tyler's blurred shape at his desk, and the narrow hallway beyond. Caroline noticed the glance. Of course she noticed. That was part of why she had become dangerous in rooms like this. "You're looking at a father," Jack said finally. "A man with a daughter in second grade, rent due on the first, a car that needs brake pads, and a job he needs to keep. That is the part of me that matters here." Something in Caroline's expression shifted, but not enough to soften. "Then why are sealed military records showing up where a normal employment history should be?" "Because some records are sealed for a reason." "Were you special operations?" Jack's eyes sharpened not with anger, but with a kind of cold stillness that made Caroline realize she had stepped too close to a line she could not see. "That is one of the questions you are not allowed to ask." Caroline inhaled slowly. She was not used to being told what she could ask inside her own office. "And if I ask anyway, then I leave this room. I contact the people who handle questions like that. And your company spends the next month explaining why its CEO tried to access restricted information about an employee with no legal cause." The sentence was quiet, almost polite, and that made it land harder. Caroline looked at him for several seconds. You know exactly how that would work. Yes, because you've done this before. Because I know what boundaries are. Caroline looked away first. It was not surrender, not exactly, but it was the first time Jack had seen her make room for the possibility that control was not the same as wisdom. She walked to the side table, picked up a ceramic mug, then set it down without drinking. "I owe you an apology," she said. Jack said nothing. "Not for looking into your file," she continued, then stopped because even as she said it, she heard how hollow it sounded. She turned back. "No. That too. I crossed a line. But before that in the auditorium, I embarrassed you in front of people who already thought they had permission not to see you. I was angry at an interruption, and I made you the object of it because you were the easiest person in the room to make small." Jack's face remained controlled, but his silence changed. Caroline could feel it. This was not the silence of an employee waiting for a superior to finish. It was the silence of a man deciding whether her words were worth keeping. Peter Caldwell spilled the coffee. Jack said, "I know, you knew then." Caroline paused. "Yes, there was no point lying. And you still looked at me." "Yes." The word cost her more the second time. Jack nodded once as if confirming something he had already known. "Then apologize to your people too, not just me. A room learns from the person holding the microphone." Caroline's eyes flickered. There it was, the solution he had come to offer and the challenge she had not expected. Jack was not asking for money, a promotion, revenge, or public praise. He was asking her to correct the lesson she had taught. "You want me to address it?" she asked. "I want you to decide what kind of company you are running. If the answer is one where a person can be humiliated because their shirt has a facilities patch on it, then say nothing." Everyone already understood that version. Caroline's cheeks flushed slightly, but she did not interrupt. Jack stepped back toward the door. "If you want a different version, you know what to do." He left before she could dismiss him. For the rest of the morning, Jack worked as if nothing had happened, but nothing felt settled. He replaced filters on the 28th floor, checked a leak beneath a kitchenette sink on 18, and repaired a jammed storage closet lock near the legal department, all while the building's whispers moved faster than he could. By noon, Caroline had sent a company-wide message acknowledging that her comment in the quarterly meeting had been inappropriate, that respect was not tied to title, and that every employee and contractor deserved dignity in shared spaces. She did not name Jack. That was good. She did not make herself the hero of the apology. That was better. But apologies had consequences too. By 1 o'clock, people were looking at Jack more than before, some with guilt, some with curiosity, some with the fresh discomfort of realizing they had laughed silently at something they now had permission to call wrong. Henry Cole found Jack in the service corridor and grinned like he had personally won a prize. "Well, I'll be damned," Henry said. "You got the queen to bow." Jack gave him a warning look. "Don't start." "I'm starting a little." "Don't." Henry's smile faded when he saw Jack's face. "This doesn't feel good to you." "Attention is attention," Jack said. "Doesn't matter what direction it comes from." Before Henry could answer, Jack's phone vibrated. He looked down and saw the school's number. Everything inside him tightened. He answered before the second ring. Lily was in the nurse's office with a low fever and stomach pain. Nothing severe, but school policy required pickup if a parent was available. Jack was already moving before the nurse finished explaining. He found Richard Bennett in the basement supply room and told him he had to leave. Richard glanced at the schedule board, then at Jack's face, and whatever complaint he had prepared disappeared. "Go," he said. "Text me later." Jack took the train because traffic was impossible at that hour, one hand gripping the pole, eyes fixed on the window while his mind split itself between Lily's temperature, missed wages, Caroline's apology, Robert Hayes, and the old number that had texted him to protect the girl. He reached the school in 23 minutes. Lily was curled on a vinyl cot under a thin blanket, pale and miserable, clutching a paper cup of water like it had personally betrayed her. The moment she saw him, her brave face collapsed. "Dad," she whispered. Jack sat beside her and put his hand on her forehead. Warm, but not dangerous. "I'm here." She leaned into him with all her small weight, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. On the train home, she slept against his arm while he held her steady through every turn. At the apartment, he settled her on the couch, with a bowl nearby, tea she would not drink, and the deep-sea documentary she loved. For an hour, there was only Lily breathing softly under her blanket and strange, glowing creatures moving across the television screen. Then she opened her eyes and said, "Did the lady say sorry?" Jack looked over. "Yes, a real sorry." "Real enough." Lily frowned at the glowing jellyfish on the screen. "Did it fix it?" That question stayed with him longer than the apology had. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. This time it was not the school, not Richard, not anyone saved in his contacts. Unknown number. One message. "You have been seen." Jack stood slowly moving away from the couch so Lily would not read his face. A second message appeared. "Code name confirmed. Chicago is not quiet anymore." For 3 seconds, Jack heard nothing. Not the documentary, not traffic outside, not Lily shifting under the blanket. The past had not merely found a crack now. It had put its hand through the door. He deleted the messages, then checked the hallway lock, the window latch, and the small emergency bag hidden behind the coats in the closet. Lily watched him from the couch, too tired to understand, but not too tired to notice. "Dad," she asked. Jack turned, forcing his face back into the shape she knew. "Everything's okay." Lily's eyes narrowed weakly. "That's the voice you use when it isn't." Jack crossed the room and knelt beside her. For years he had believed protecting Lily meant keeping the truth far away from her, wrapping their lives in ordinary routines until danger forgot their address. But danger had not forgotten. It had followed the sound of whispers through a corporate tower, through Caroline's questions, through old men who recognized old ghosts. Jack took Lily's hand gently. "Some people from before I was your dad may be asking questions," he said carefully. "Bad people I don't know yet." Fear moved through her face, quick and honest. Jack hated himself for putting it there, even softly. "But listen to me. You are safe. I know what to do. Are we leaving?" The question almost broke him because it meant some part of her had always known their life could change quickly. Jack looked around the apartment, the handprint wall in her room, Grace's photograph, the homework on the table, the dinosaur cup by the sink, the fragile, ordinary world he had built piece by piece. His first instinct was to run, pack the bag, take the cash, leave before sunset, become someone else before anyone got close. He had done harder things with less warning. But then he thought of Caroline's office, of telling her to stop letting fear and power decide the truth. He thought of Lily asking whether silence fixed anything. He thought of all the years he had spent disappearing and how disappearing had not saved them from this moment. "No," Jack said at last. "Not yet." Lily squeezed his fingers. "Then what are we doing?" Jack looked toward the window where the city lights had begun to glow against the gray afternoon. For the first time, the decision inside him did not feel like hiding. It felt like standing still on purpose. "We're going to find out who opened the door," he said, "and then I'm going to close it." Jack Whitaker did not sleep that night, not in any real sense. He lay on the narrow couch with the emergency bag under one hand and the hallway light still glowing for Lily behind him, listening to the apartment breathe around them, the refrigerator humming, the pipes knocking softly inside the walls, a car passing below, a neighbor's footsteps above. Every sound became information. Every silence became a question. By morning, the old part of him had fully awakened, the part he had buried beneath lunchboxes, school pickups, grocery lists, and bedtime stories. But this time, it did not feel like a return to the man he used to be. It felt like that man had finally stepped into the same room as the father he had become, and for once, neither of them was willing to run. Jack got Lily ready for school with unusual gentleness. He checked her temperature twice, made toast she only half ate, and packed her lunch with the small note he sometimes wrote on napkins when he knew she needed courage. Today it said, "You do not have to be fearless. You only have to keep singing." Lily read it at the table, looked at him, and folded it carefully into her pocket instead of putting it in her backpack. "Are we still safe?" she asked. Jack crouched in front of her. "Yes, because you know what to do." "Because I know what to do," he said. This time the answer was not a performance. After dropping her off, Jack did not go straight to his maintenance locker. He entered Northbridge Tower through the main lobby for the first time since he had started working there. People glanced at him because of the uniform, then glanced again because of the way he walked. There was nothing aggressive in it, nothing theatrical, but he no longer moved as if asking the building not to notice him. He moved as if he had already measured every corner of it and decided he belonged there as much as anyone else. Robert Hayes was waiting near the security desk either by coincidence or because men like Robert did not rely on coincidence. Jack stopped in front of him. "Someone sent messages to my personal phone," Jack said. Robert's expression hardened. "When?" "Yesterday afternoon. They used the old designation." Robert's eyes flicked once toward the elevators, then back. "Who else knows?" "My daughter knows enough to be scared." "That means too many people know." Robert nodded slowly. The respect in his face had changed into something heavier responsibility. "Come with me." They took the service elevator to the 38th floor to a small internal security office with no windows and a door that locked from the inside. Mark Reynolds was already there along with a laptop, 3 printed access logs, and the tense quiet of men who understood that information could become a weapon faster than a gun. Jack did not sit. Robert pushed one page across the table. "Someone requested badge movement records tied to your employee ID 3 days ago. The request was routed as an executive security audit." "Who signed it?" Jack asked. Robert's jaw tightened. "Caroline Whitmore's office." For a moment, the room seemed to contract. Jack looked at the paper, then at Robert. "Her assistant. Tyler Brooks initiated the request. But there's more. After that, an external consultant accessed a limited vendor database and searched your name with prior service markers. That access did not come through us." Mark added quietly, "Whoever messaged you may have found you through the noise we created." Jack absorbed that without visible reaction, but something inside him turned cold. Caroline's curiosity had not merely invaded his privacy, it had created a trail. A trail had become a signal. A signal had reached people who still recognized the old code name. He had warned her about boundaries, but consequences had arrived before wisdom could. "I need to speak to her," Jack said. Robert stood. "I'll go with you." "No." Jack's voice was calm but final. "This is mine." Caroline was in a board preparation meeting when Tyler interrupted with a pale face and said, "Mr. Whitaker was outside." The room went quiet. 3 executives looked annoyed. 1 board member looked intrigued. Caroline looked at Tyler, saw the fear there, and dismissed the meeting without explanation. When Jack entered, she knew before he spoke that something had gone wrong. Not corporate wrong, human wrong. "Did your office pull my badge logs?" Jack asked. Caroline went still. Tyler, standing behind her, lowered his eyes. "I asked for a security review," she said. "Did you authorize an external background search?" "I contacted a private consultant to understand what I couldn't understand." The sentence sounded smaller after she said it. Jack stared at her, and the force of his restraint was worse than anger would have been. "Yesterday, someone sent my personal phone a message using a name that should never have left sealed channels. My daughter asked me if we had to leave our home." Caroline's face lost its professional composure. For the first time, Jack saw not the CEO, not the woman from the microphone, but a person forced to witness the damage her need for control had caused. "I didn't know that would happen," she said. "No," Jack replied. "You didn't care enough to know what could happen." The words hit her hard because they were true. Tyler looked as if he wanted the floor to open beneath him. Caroline pressed a hand against the edge of her desk. "I am sorry. That is not enough anymore." "I know." The room held its breath. Jack had come prepared to cut every connection, resign, pull Lily from school, disappear by nightfall if necessary. He had done the math on the train. New city, new name, new school, cash first, digital footprint later. But standing there looking at Caroline's face as she began to understand that power without humility could hurt people beyond the room it spoke in, Jack felt something shift. Running would protect Lily for a while, but it would also teach her that fear decides where they live. He had spent years teaching her the opposite. "You want to fix this?" he asked. Caroline nodded once. "Yes." "Then stop asking who I was and start dealing with what your company did. I want every external inquiry shut down. I want to know who received what. I want Robert Hayes in charge of internal containment, not your consultant, not your assistant, not anyone who thinks curiosity is a security protocol. I want written confirmation that my daughter's name, address, school, and any dependent information were not accessed, copied, or shared." Caroline did not argue. She took a notepad from her desk and began writing. That simple act changed the room. She was not performing apology now. She was taking instruction from the man she had once treated as background. "And one more thing," Jack said. She looked up. "You are going to speak to the people who saw you humiliate me, not in an email, in person. You are going to tell them what happened, not the classified part, not my past, but your part. You are going to say you were wrong to reduce a man to his uniform, because until you do that, this building will keep pretending the apology solved what the microphone broke." Caroline's eyes shone, though no tears fell. "You're right." Jack almost looked away. He had expected resistance, defensiveness, legal language. Instead, he saw the first real fracture in the armor Caroline had mistaken for strength. It did not make everything right, but it made the next step possible. That afternoon, Caroline called an all-hands meeting in the same auditorium where the humiliation had happened. Jack did not want to attend, but Robert told him quietly that absence would turn him into a rumor, and rumor was exactly what they needed to end. So Jack stood at the back near the service door, not with his cart this time, not kneeling, not invisible. Caroline walked to the podium without slides, without charts, without numbers to hide behind. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she looked toward the back of the room, found Jack, and began. "Last week in this room, I used this microphone to make a man feel smaller than he is. I did it because I was irritated. I did it because I had power in the room and he did not. I did it because I forgot that dignity is not something leadership hands down when convenient. It is something every person already has." The room was utterly still. Peter Caldwell sat in the fourth row, face pale, hands folded so tightly his knuckles whitened. Caroline continued, her voice steady but stripped of its usual sharp polish. "Mr. Whitaker was doing his job. I failed at mine. If any of you learned from me that day that status determines respect, then let me be clear now that lesson was wrong." Jack felt the entire room turn toward him, not all at once, but like weather shifting. He hated it. He endured it, because Lily had asked if a sorry fixed anything, and now he understood the answer. A sorry did not fix damage by existing. It fixed only what action was brave enough to touch. After the meeting, Peter Caldwell approached him in the hallway, trembling with shame. "I should have spoken up," Peter said. "It was my coffee. I let you take that moment." Jack looked at him for a long second. "Yes, you did." Peter swallowed. "I'm sorry." Jack nodded. "Do better next time." It was not warm, but it was mercy. Later, Caroline found Jack near the loading dock where he stood alone in the cold air calling Lily's school to confirm pickup. She waited until he ended the call. "Robert is locking down the inquiry," she said. "The consultant has been terminated. Your dependent file was not accessed. I'll send you written confirmation within the hour." Jack nodded. "Thank you." The words surprised both of them. Caroline wrapped her arms around herself against the wind. "Can this be repaired?" she asked. Jack looked toward the street where buses hissed through late afternoon traffic and ordinary people hurried home to ordinary lives. "Maybe," he said. but not quickly. Caroline accepted that. I don't deserve quickly. For the first time, Jack believed she understood the cost of what she had done. Not because she had been embarrassed, but because she had frightened a child she had never met. That evening, he picked Lily up on time. She studied his face as soon as she saw him. "Did you close the door?" she asked. Jack took her backpack and smiled, tired but real. "I started." On the walk home, Lily slid her hand into his. "That counts," she said. Jack looked down at her at the small hand, trusting his, and felt the old life settle back into silence. Not gone, never gone, but no longer driving. He had not run. He had not hidden. He had stood where he was and made the truth stay in the room. For the first time in years, Jack understood that protecting Lily did not always mean disappearing from danger. Sometimes it meant becoming visible enough that danger had nowhere left to hide. The day everything became clear began with a sound Jack Whitaker knew too well. Not the alarm itself, but the hesitation before people believed it. At 11:48 on Thursday morning, the fire alarms screamed through Northbridge Tower, two sharp pulses repeating over and over, bouncing off glass walls, marble floors, and conference room doors where employees lifted their heads with the same annoyed disbelief they always had during false alarms. Jack was on the 29th floor checking a humidity sensor outside a server room when the first pulse hit. For 4 seconds, he listened like everyone else. On the 5th, he smelled smoke. Not toast, not burned popcorn, not the thin chemical scent of an overheated copier. This was dense electrical fed by insulation and old wiring, the kind of smoke that meant a problem had already been alive for several minutes before anyone gave it a name. Jack moved to the window at the end of the hall and looked across at the mirrored tower opposite Northbridge. In the reflection, a dark ribbon curled from the southwest side of the building somewhere below him. He pulled the radio from his belt. "Whitaker Maintenance 29. Confirm active floor." Static cracked, then Mark Reynolds answered, his voice tight but controlled. 22 Southwest Quadrant. Electrical fire near the server corridor. Suppression activated, not contained. Evacuation underway. Jack was already walking toward the stairwell. "Who's still inside?" A pause. Too long. 4 employees trapped in conference room 2214. Doorframe warped. Stairwell B compromised. Stairwell A accessible, but the corridors filling fast. Fire department is 2 minutes out. 2 minutes could mean 4. 4 could mean dead. Jack opened the stairwell door and started down. "I'm going in." Mark's voice sharpened. "Jack, wait for responders." "No time." He cut the radio and moved faster. By the time he reached 22, the air behind the stairwell door was warm. He touched the handle first, then the frame. Not fatal yet. He pushed through low, pulling his uniform collar over his mouth. Smoke pressed against the ceiling in thick, rolling layers, dropping toward the floor inch by inch. Emergency lights turned the hallway orange, but visibility was already failing. Jack moved beneath the smoke line, counting doors by memory because he knew the building better than most people who owned offices in it. 1 door. 2. 3. Left at the conference block. Heat strengthened there, pushing against his face like a warning hand. He heard voices behind room 2214, muffled and strained. The door would not move when he pulled normally. Warped frame, pressure-sealed, not locked. He shifted his grip, lifted at the hinge side, pulled up and out with a brutal angled force, and the door tore open. 4 people crouched inside, coughing, eyes wide with the animal terror of people who had realized their salaries, titles, and calendars meant nothing against smoke. Peter Caldwell was among them, down on one knee, jacket over his face, the same man whose spilled coffee had started the chain of humiliation weeks earlier. Jack did not mention it. "Up," he ordered. "Stay low. Hand on the person in front of you. Do not run. Do not stand. You move when I move." One woman began crying. "We can't see." "You don't need to see. You need to follow my voice." There was no panic in him now, only purpose. The old training had returned, but it no longer belonged to the old war. It belonged to this corridor, these strangers, this building, this life. He pulled Peter to his feet and led them into the hallway. The smoke was worse than when he had entered. 40 seconds had changed the entire shape of the floor. He kept one hand on Peter, one hand along the wall, counting steps, turns, temperature breath. Behind him, the trapped employees moved in a trembling chain. At the stairwell, Jack shoved the door open and clean air rushed over them like mercy. "Down," he said. "All the way to the lobby. Do not stop." One woman grabbed his sleeve. "What about you?" Jack looked back into the corridor. Mark had said 2 security officers had gone in before him. He had not passed them. "I'm not finished." He went back before she could argue. This time the smoke was lower. The heat had teeth. He found Connor Walsh first, a young security guard coughing hard, dragging Thomas Reed beneath one arm. Thomas was conscious but fading, eyes streaming, legs nearly useless. Connor looked up, stunned. "How did you—" "Move now," Jack said. He got under Thomas's other arm and lifted most of the man's weight onto himself. "Connor, shirt over your face. Match my pace exactly. If I stop, you stop. If I move, you move. Say yes." "Yes." Again. "Yes." They moved. The corridor behind them groaned as something in the ceiling gave way. Sparks spat through smoke. Thomas collapsed twice, and twice Jack hauled him upright without letting the chain break. His eyes burned, his lungs clawed. A strip of heat kissed the back of his hand as they passed a service panel, but he did not slow. The stairwell appeared as a rectangle of dim, gray light just when the corridor began to disappear completely. They reached it with seconds to spare. Jack pushed Connor through, dragged Thomas after him, and slammed the door behind them as smoke slammed against the other side. In the lobby, chaos had become organized fear. Employees crowded outside in the cold. Firefighters pushed in. Paramedics shouted. Caroline Whitmore, evacuated from the 39th floor, stood near the command area with Tyler Brooks beside her, pale and shaken, watching as Jack emerged from the stairwell, carrying half the weight of a man twice his size. For a moment, she did not understand what she was seeing. Then Peter Caldwell staggered toward her from the triage area, oxygen mask in hand, tears cutting tracks through soot on his face. "He came for us," Peter said, voice breaking. "He opened the door. He got us out. Then he went back in." Caroline turned to Jack. His face was streaked with smoke, his eyes red, his hand burned, his uniform torn at the shoulder. He was not posing. He was not waiting for praise. He was scanning the crowd, counting heads, making sure no one else was missing. Robert Hayes reached him first, and in front of everyone, the old security consultant did something no one in Northbridge Tower would ever forget. He straightened, looked Jack in the eye, and said, "Welcome back, Guardian." The code name hit the air like thunder. Jack's face tightened, but he did not deny it. Caroline heard it, and at last every hidden piece found its place. The sealed records, the old soldier's respect, the silence, the boundaries, the fear for Lily, the life he had chosen instead of the one that could have made him powerful. Guardian was not a rumor. It was not office gossip. It was the shadow of a man who had spent years saving people who would never know his name. And she had once made him kneel in front of her for spilled coffee. Later, after the fire was contained, after Thomas and Connor were taken to the hospital alive, after the board demanded explanations and lawyers began choosing careful words, Caroline found Jack at the edge of the crowd calling Lily's school. "I'll still be there by 3:30, he was saying, voice rough from smoke. "Tell her I'm okay." When he ended the call, Caroline approached slowly. "Jack." He looked at her, exhausted. "Not now." "Yes," she said softly, "now. Because if I wait until it is comfortable, I will make the same mistake again." He said nothing. Caroline's eyes filled, but this time she did not hide behind professionalism. "I treated you like less because I thought my title made me more. I chased your past because I thought knowledge was control. I put you and Lily in danger because I was too proud to respect a boundary I didn't understand. And today you saved the same company that failed to see you." Jack looked away toward the school bus line forming down the street as if Lily might somehow appear there by force of habit. I didn't do it for the company, I know Caroline said.
You did it because people were trapped.
That was the first true thing she had said without needing to make herself part of it. In the weeks that followed, Northbridge changed. Not magically, not perfectly, but visibly. Caroline stood before the entire company and told the truth she was allowed to tell, that leadership without humility had harmed people, that respect would no longer depend on title, and that safety, dignity, and accountability would be rebuilt from the ground up. Peter Caldwell apologized publicly. Tyler resigned from executive operations after admitting he had pushed the external search further than authorized. Robert stayed on to help secure what should never have been exposed. And Jack, after many conversations with Lily, accepted a new role as Director of Safety and Crisis Response, but only with one condition written clearly into his contract. Lily's school events came first. Caroline agreed without negotiation. Months later, Jack sat in the fourth row of Lily's school auditorium as she stepped onto the small stage in a purple dress from a thrift store, hands shaking around the microphone. For a second, fear almost won. Then Lily found her father in the crowd. Jack did not wave, he simply nodded once, the same steady nod that had guided people through smoke. Lily breathed in and began to sing. Her voice trembled, then steadied, then filled the room with something braver than perfection. Jack felt Grace beside him, in memory felt the old life settle into silence, felt the new one hold. Afterward, Lily ran into his arms and whispered, "I was scared, but I remembered why I was there." Jack held her close. That's all courage is. Outside, snow began to fall over Chicago, softening the streets, the tower, the city that had once felt too large to survive. Caroline watched from a distance, invited but careful, changed enough to understand that some endings were not hers to enter. Jack took Lily's hand and walked toward their favorite cafe for hot chocolate she would not finish. He was no longer a ghost hiding from his past, and he was no longer a man made small by someone else's blindness. He was Jack Whitaker, father, protector, survivor. And at last he knew that love had not pulled him away from who he was. Love had brought him home.